Hey guys, CJ with Roswell Astronomy, and today we are going to figure out the cable management of doing some custom cable management on the CEM60. So first things first, go ahead and release your clutches and make sure your locking pin is in the RA. You don't want to be forcing against the gears or the motors while you're moving things around. And then go ahead and remove those two hex screws out of the back of your deck there. When you're finished with that, go ahead and start removing the 4 bolts that are holding the saddle plate down onto the deck. And once you get those released, you should be able just to lift up. You may have to jimmy it a little bit, but it will come free. When you get it off, you're going to see 4 of these screws underneath the back of the deck there. You want to go ahead and remove those 4 screws, and that'll give you access to the USB board. There's 2 screws that hold that in there, and just go ahead and pull those out and it'll come free. Now what I did was I just cut the wires for the DC inputs there on the top of the deck, and then I just backfed the wires through the channel down through the throat of the RA when I go to pull it out there here in a little while. Now the level, there's 2 screws that hold your level on. You want to remove those 2 screws, and then your LED reticle there with the blue arrow, just go ahead and unscrew that. It'll come right off for you. When you're done with that, you're going to take the 3 set screws that are there in the sides, what you're going to pull out to get that collar off, and then you got those 3 screws there in order to get the plate off. When you do that, just take a screwdriver, pop it out a little bit, and just be careful because you got the wires behind there, and at which point you can then disconnect the wires. They just got little white plastic plug-ins you can remove. You're then going to have 3 more set screws, or 2, maybe 3, depending. Just go ahead and release those, pull them out. And then once you get done doing that, you should be able just to pull that polar scope right on out. Mine was a little rough, but it did come out. And then when you're done with that, go ahead and feed your wires down through. Like I said, I had cut mine, so you don't have to cut yours. You can feed them through that little those channels that are at the bottom there. There's 3 channels. When you're done with that, you want to take that board, the green board, off of the collar there. So just 3 screws, that's all you got to do. Take those off, and that will release the board. Now obviously you have the plates that are on the mount that have the DC inputs, and I was not going to use the back plate of the deck because I was going to do my own custom DC jacks. So I just cut two little plates out of actually an old cutting board that I had in the kitchen there with the Dremel tool. Just cut them out and sanded them to size, and then drilled 3 holes in the back deck for 3 DC jacks, and then made one for the front of the deck, drilled 1 hole for a DC jack up there, and just got a 3-prong jacks off of Amazon, and I'll put a link at the end of all the parts and stuff that I used. So what I did was, after I drilled the holes, just fed the jacks through there and then soldered the wires. It does have 2 negatives on the side, 1 positive center, and once I got done doing that, just made it nice and clean, and did it for the front deck as well as the back deck. Now when you're finished doing that, make sure that you go back and check your continuity. Make sure that you got center positive on your jacks, as well as checking your negative. You don't want to plug your camera in and realize that you accidentally messed something up. It's better to go ahead and check it now. As a matter of fact, I actually checked my continuity 3 or 4 times during the whole process. When you're done with that, working on the front of the deck here, I just bend my wires just a little bit in order to get up through that channel. Little cable lay there. You have to do a little bit of a curl, and once I fed it up through there, that's it. It's easy. You just pull it through, and then slide your panel back into place. And like I said, I only did one in the front for now, but I've got room in there if I want to go back and do something different. And it wasn't that difficult, especially with the Dremel. You could probably do it with a small coping saw too if you wanted to. And then I just drilled the smaller holes for the screw holes, and then used a larger bit in order to bevel them a little bit so that they would sit nice and flush. When you're doing that, just curl your cable around. You can start feeding it down through your deck, and which is quite easy. As you see, I've already set the USB cable in there. It was very easy to feed it down. And then started on the other side and just went ahead and did the exact same thing. Laid the wires on top of each other though, in order to maximize the space in that channel. I didn't want them all twisted up. And once you get it fed through there, I did have an issue right here. When I went to put these in, because of my soldering, I had a wire loop was a little bit too long, so it was kind of hitting there. So all you got to do is just bend it back carefully a little bit, just kind of smoosh it, just make sure your contacts don't touch each other, and then it fit right in there with just a little bit of force. It was able to go right in there, and then just screwed right on down. Now when you go to feed your cables through, you can take all of them at one time, tape the ends together, and just shove it through if you want to, or you can do it one at a time. I also cable tied the very top of the cables for the two that came out of the back of the deck, and that was just to keep them all from rolling all over the place. Once you get the wires through, just go ahead and secure your hex screws back in, and you should have a little bit of extra cable there in order to push down in. And I went with 3 feet of cable, or wire, I guess I should say, not cable but wire, and that left me plenty on the bottom in order to cut to size, and also make sure I had plenty of room up there at the top. Should always advise safety when you're doing these kind of projects. Make sure that you don't miss the chair. So we're back to the ring again, and that's the 12-volt jack that's at the bottom, or that was underneath the polar scope. And what I'm going to do is tie that back into the output up there on the front of the deck. So one of the things I'm going to make sure I do, that I've got the right wire to the right location again, is to do a continuity test on it. All I'm doing is sounding it out. I just want to make sure that I'm hooking the right things up. And part of that's because I've got one power feed that's supplying 2 of the outputs on the back of the deck, which is going to be for the Moonlight controller and the USB hub, since they're extremely low power. After that, I've got one dedicated to the dew heater, and I've got one dedicated to the camera. So that particular wire that's going to connect to the input to that place, you want to feed that through the channel on the bottom there, and there's 3 channels, 2 on each side and 1 on the bottom. And then once you get that done, take your ring and you're going to measure to where that wire is going to connect into the back of. There's a little screw input there. So when you get done, just go ahead and strip your wires once you got them to size, because you don't want too much extra wire that's in there. And then when you're finished with that, go ahead and feed your ring back up in there, and you're going to see those 2 little screw compression sockets, and that's where your wires are going to go. Just make sure that you put the positive to the positive and your negative to the negative, and I always do red as positive, black as negative. And when you get them in there, just screw them down. Once you get done with that, go ahead and feed your wires back through the ring. As you can see, I've got plenty of extra wire down there, and there of course is my USB 3.0 cable that I fed up through the middle of it. And then you're going to attach the back, that black plate back to it. If you remember, there were 3 screws on the back that are going to hold it. So just line it up, get her set, and then go ahead and grab your screwdriver and put those 3 screws back in there again. once you get that done and it's secured, go ahead and start feeding it back into its place. You may have to do a little bit of adjustment with that bottom wire just to kind of feed it back in a little bit to give you enough room, because it was kind of tight. And then go ahead and put those 3 screws back into the front there. And you know, if you're doing this when you're tired, you tend to keep dropping screws. Yeah, that's exactly what I kept doing. But I finally got it. It took a little trial and error, but I did finally get it. So at that point, there's the leads that came down. Again, you're going to want to go ahead and do a continuity test on it and trace them to where you want them to, so you know which ones you're connecting. And then I went ahead and attached my power poles, cut the wires to length, stripped them, and put on my power poles. And this is what you end up with. So I've got my USB 3.0 on the top and my dew heater on the top. My USB cable comes out and goes just underneath the Lismondi plate. You can see there's some space there, so it's not being kinked or nudged. I've got my power cable coming out of the Moonlight, which is plugging there into the yellow side, and the USB power is also plugged into the yellow side. The green side is strictly for the camera only. That is a dedicated single line feed, and the yellow side is a split because they're both extremely low draw. The one in the front is dedicated as well with a single line, and that is for the dew heater because it is drawing higher amps, so I wanted to make sure it was dedicated. And when you're all said and done, there's no cable drag. You have nothing that's coming off the deck. Everything is going to be coming right there out of the center of your RA. And that's it. That's all you got to do. Makes it seem pretty easy, doesn't it?